At what age did you first discover pornography? One of the most common questions I get asked is, how long does it take for my brain to heal from the negative effects of porn addiction? How long does it take until I'm no longer an addict? Well, it turns out that depends heavily on when you first discovered pornography and how old you are now. So let's look at some data and let's break this down. Let's start with this here. This is data that comes from a survey done on a very large, diverse data set. So I think this is probably representative data, and it certainly covers with most of the people I've talked to about this. Now, note that the question asked here is not when did you discover porn, but when did you semi-regularly at least start using it? So basically, when did you become a porn user? Now, most of my audience are men, so the solid blue line is the most relevant one here, but then the curves are all similar enough for our purposes that it doesn't really matter, because the pattern we clearly see is that there is the majority here, there's like this peak essentially here, where we see the majority of people start using porn right here in the early to mid-teens, right? 11 to 16 roughly. Another way we can also see this is that we can see that it's quite rare for anyone to start using porn later than 17 or 18 unless that person is a woman. Now, the reason this matters is that because the younger you are, the more adaptable your brain is. Basically, a young brain learns and changes much, much faster than an old brain. As I've explained in other videos, you can really think of anything you do as training your brain. You get better at anything you do repeatedly, and your brain is always adjusting and learning, even for things that don't feel like learning. So if you use a lot of pornography, you are essentially training your brain to do that. And you are training a certain set of habits. Whether you think of it as training or not, and whether these are good habits or not, don't matter, right? Your brain is just making the things you do repeatedly more and more efficient over time. And this habit forming is much faster and much more effective the younger you are. So this is the first way in which the age at which you discover porn matters a lot. So if we look at this, let's say this column here, right, this section of 9 to 10-year-olds, we can say that, well, these people who started using porn that young are in more trouble than people further to the right of the graph. Because at this age, habits and addictions form more quickly and more deeply. And then, of course, people who are over here are in even more trouble, and over here even worse. Simply because the young brain is so adaptable. So that is why this matters. So if we think along the age from young to old, it basically means that the younger you are, the easier it is, and the older you are, the harder it is to change your habits, to build new habits, to retrain your brain, to rewire your brain. This is why the second question of, well, how old are you now that you're trying to quit porn is also important. The worst case scenario is that you start very young and then you're addicted for a long time, and you're relatively old by the time you're trying to undo the damage. Because not only have you had more years to let the bad habits and the addiction ingrain themselves in your brain and in your life, but also because you're older, it's going to take more effort to undo the damage and rewire your brain. But it's not all bad news. So this graph here shows, and it's a very simplified graph, but it basically just shows, again, over time, as you age, on the one hand, your brain's ability to change, to rewire itself, to change your habits and so on. And on the other hand, the amount of effort it takes to do that. Now, what's important here is that the ability here does not go to zero, right? Even in your 70s, your brain still changes. Up until a while ago, the accepted ideas about neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to change and learn new things, was that after about 25, that's it, right? Whatever brain you have when you're 25 years old, that's what you're stuck with for life. So we used to think that this curve goes something like this, which would mean that if you form an addiction before the age of 25, you're an addict forever. Maybe you can manage your addiction, but you're basically going to be an addict forever. But luckily, new data has shown that this is not true. And the more we understand the brain, the more we see that the brain can actually change and learn and regrow even into old age. And this is also not inevitable, right? This decline here is average. So it's not that you simply grow older and your brain deteriorates. It's also that most of the people in these studies will not have the healthiest lifestyle, will maybe not do a lot to take care of their brain health, and that's part of the reason for the decline. So that's the good news. No matter your age, you can undo the damage. But we also have to take this here into account, which basically means the older you are, the more of an effort you have to make to rewire your brain. Now, you have a personal experience of this already, actually, because you've learned a language. And as a baby, you learn a language from scratch just by listening to other people speak that language, and you start making noises, and eventually you speak the language. And all this happens relatively quickly and without much perceived effort. Of course, there's still an effort, but in a way, it also just happens by itself. And that's because it's happening over here. It's happening where your brain's ability to learn new stuff is at its maximum, and it takes the least effort to change. And later in life, you can still learn a new language, but if you're in your 30s or 40s or older, you can't expect to just hang around a bunch of people who speak a language and then kind of pick it up naturally. You will have to make more of a deliberate effort and apply some good strategies in order to make this happen. And this is another factor that we don't see in this graph is, of course, there are bad ways and good ways to learn a language. If you follow an ineffective language teaching system, you're making it way harder for yourself, and it just means more time, more effort, and the same is true for anything else. So if we bring this back to pornography addiction, it's the same kind of thing. Your first factor is, well, how young were you when you started forming these habits? And the younger you were, the more work you have to do to undo this. And then the second question is, how old are you now? And if you're still in your 20s, or even in your teens, you'll have a much easier time, and it'll be much quicker to also undo that damage. But like I said, even if you're older, it's not like all hope is lost. It will just take more time and take more effort. And the older you are, the more important strategy becomes. So to illustrate this, right, let's say you discovered or started using porn when you were 12, and then 2 years later you realize this is bad, I want to stop. So now you're 14, and all you do is you quit. You just go, well, I've been watching porn a lot, I'm just going to stop and kind of tough it out through the withdrawal symptoms, and that's it. If that's all you do, that's almost zero strategy, right? Well, in this case, because you're still very young and you haven't been addicted for that long, that might be all it takes, right? That might be all it takes to fix your brain from the effects of porn use. But if you started using porn when you were 12 and now you're 25, so you've used it for half your life, and your brain isn't that young anymore, well, now just quitting and hoping for the best is probably not going to be good enough. And this is what a lot of my content is about, is to make sure that even if you've been addicted for a long time, and even if just stopping isn't enough for you, as a lot of people discover that, right? A lot of people will start doing NoFap or something, will hope for a miracle, and then it doesn't come, or they find that just trying to quit is just not enough, right? They try their hardest, but they keep relapsing. Well, this simply means that you are somewhere in this region of the graph where it takes more time and effort, right? And it takes a better strategy than just trying. But it's important to know that it's absolutely possible to do, and with the right approach, with the right strategies, you can really compress that time it takes for your brain to heal very considerably. So if you're ready to quit and wondering where to go next, check out the link in the description to join my Discord community, where you can join over 1,500 other guys who have decided to quit porn or using the Quit by Healing strategies to do so, and are sharing their successes. Plus, if you're new to all this, watch this video next, which is my crash course on how you should quit if this is the first time you're considering doing this, or if you've tried NoFap and that didn't work for you.